Welcome to session 23 of this simple course. In the first part of the session today, we'll start exploring the fourth and last DBT skills module, which is interpersonal skills. In the second part of the session, we'll introduce the sixth and last simple tool, which is wise mind remediation. When we fall into the holes that are our holes diary card targets, we are an emotional mind. The chain analysis helps understand those holes by asking what triggers them, as well as what we feel, think, and do when we are in them. Rational mind remediation, the fourth simple tool, asks what we would feel, think, and do in those situations had we been in rational rather than emotional mind. Wise mind remediation goes one step further and asks what we would feel, think, and do in those situations if instead of emotional mind, we had been in wise mind, which is not only rational, but also deeply understands and empathizes with our emotional mind. To watch the introductory videos entitled How to Overcome Trauma and Pat Ogden on Structural Dissociation, please go to session 23 on the website itssimple2021.com. Next are our usual reminders directed mostly at people doing the course in a group setting. Please take a few moments to read these on your own. To watch this week's mindfulness practice video entitled Leaves on a Stream, please go to the website now. For people doing the YouTube course as part of a group, you can now pause for questions, comments, or feedback. This is what we will do today. We'll start by reviewing the skills training workbook, pages 207 to 227. At midway point, we'll take a break. As usual, we will have time for a discussion. We'll also present session 23 of the course, which introduces wise mind remediation. Note that in this session, as we introduce wise mind remediation, we bring up the concept of internal family part selves, which we will explore in greater detail next week. Don't worry if you don't totally understand the concept this week, but don't miss next week's session. Please take a few moments to rate your homework now. This week, we're reviewing pages 207 to 227 of the skills training workbook. This section of the workbook covers 7 topics. 1, mindful attention. 2, compassion for others. 3, passive versus aggressive behavior. 4, I want, they want ratio. 5, I want, I should ratio. 6, key interpersonal skills. And 7, blocks to using interpersonal skills. To watch 2 videos on interpersonal skills, please go to the website now. Relationships are important to our well-being. Interpersonal skills keep our relationships healthy. Interpersonal skills are the skills necessary to manage our relationships from intimate to casual ones in a manner that our objectives for the relationship are met, the relationships are mutually satisfying, and are respectful both of ourselves and others. Interpersonal skills have several components, including social skills, assertiveness skills, listening skills, and negotiation skills. Mindfulness is an important part of interpersonal skills. Interpersonal skills require mindful attention to others, or that you are attuned to the other person's feelings and reactions and observe the communication process between you and them. The mindfulness skills help you be mindful of yourself and of others. Be mindful of their facial expressions, body language, tone, and choice of words. And this will help you to understand the mood and state of the relationship. Being mindful of others requires staying in the here and now rather than focusing on what you're going to say next and tuning others out. Being mindful of interactions allows us to notice trouble or holes that may be coming up and helps us figure out how to avoid these holes. To practice being mindful in conversations, try the mindful attention exercise found in the workbook. The ability to be compassionate is a social skill. Pain and suffering are universal. Compassion means recognizing other people's pain non judgmentally and offering help. Communication is easier when we have compassion for others. A compassionate attitude requires us to recognize that within their capacity, people are doing the best that they can. It's helpful to consider what someone else might be going through while engaging in communication with them. Communication styles can broadly be categorized into healthy or assertive, passive, aggressive, and passive aggressive. These categories lie on a spectrum from the extremes of passive to the extremes of aggressive. In this module, the goal is to learn to become more assertive. A passive communication style feels safe because you go with the flow and avoid conflict. It requires you to abandon your own needs and creates frustration and resentment that builds up. It often causes people to blow up, become depressed, or run away. It also can destroy relationships. It's more common to have a passive communication style in avoidant attachments. People with an aggressive communication style often have a sense of how things should be, right versus wrong. A communication style that comes from the need to control interpersonal events. We apply pressure to control things and get our way. It also leads us to explode, and it pushes people away, destroys relationship. An aggressive communication style is more common in people who have anxious attachment. Passive aggressive style combines both passivity with indirect or cold aggression and is more common in disorganized attachment. In healthy relationships, both people tend to get some of what they want. Every relationship consists of two people trying to get their needs met. Sometimes the two people want the same thing and resolution is easier. Other times, their needs conflict. To communicate effectively, we must 1. Know and say what we need. 2. Know what the other person needs. 3. Compromise so we can both get some of what we need. 4. Give what you can of what the other person wants. Relationships are not just about pleasure and fun. We also have to work at them. It's important to keep a balance between what you want to do and what you should do for the good of the relationship. If this ratio is out of balance and you do more of what you want and not enough of what you should, others may become resentful. If you do too much of what you should do and not enough of what you want to do, you may feel burdened and lack joy in the relationship. It's important to find a balance between what you want and should do in a relationship so that you don't deny yourself while at the same time you nurture the relationship. Having good interpersonal skills can be very rewarding. Some of the benefits of a good interpersonal relationship are that good interpersonal skills help you to be more effective in dealing with people. They improve your ability to get your needs met. They help you negotiate conflicts without damaging the relationship. And they help you strengthen your self respect by giving you alternatives to old damaging patterns of anger or withdrawal. The workbook identifies 6 key interpersonal skills. 1. Know what you want. Look for a way to describe what you're feeling and what you want. Ask for what you want in a way that protects the relationship. The next section of the workbook will give us a method for doing this in a way that is effective and not attacking. Negotiate areas of conflicting wants. Recognize that each person's needs are valid and that to have a good relationship, you need to compromise. Get information. To communicate effectively, you must understand what the other person needs, fears, hopes for, etc. Say no in a way that protects the relationship. Learning how to say no in a way that is assertive and that sets firm boundaries while validating the other person's needs is part of effective communication. Act according to your values. Reflect on your values and the kinds of relationship you want. Learn how to act in ways that incorporate your values into your relationships. For example, values of trustworthiness, lovingness, and being committed. The workbook also lists 7 barriers to implementing good interpersonal skills. 1. Aggressive habits. Sometimes we communicate in ways that utilize fear, shame, or hurtful psychological pressure. 2. Passive habits. Sometimes we shut down or surrender to give in to someone or avoid conflict. This leads to us becoming frustrated, resentful, and leads to passive aggressive behavior. 3. Overwhelming emotions. Distressing emotions impact our ability to communicate effectively. Sometimes we lose control and say or do things that we regret. What are the red flags? 4. Failure to identify needs. Communication skills fail when we don't know what we want because then we can't get what we need. Fear. Fear pushes us to use aggressive or aversive communication strategies and causes us to avoid. This leads to ineffective communication. 6. Toxic relationships. It is difficult to use effective communication skills when we are engaged with people who are committed to using ineffective communication. Hoping and planning ahead is helpful for people we can't avoid. 7. Myths. Myths we hold about effective communication, such as asking for what we need and saying no, can paralyze us and get in the way of communicating effectively. In the second part of the session today, we'll introduce the sixth and last simple tool, wise mind remediation. Can we quickly review what wise mind is? There are many ways of conceptualizing wise mind. One that I like is that it is the self-observing mind. The self that wise mind observes includes our body and its sensations and our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. Recall that according to the hot-cold empathy gap, rational and emotional mind do not understand each other very well. Wise mind, on the other hand, sees and has empathy for both rational and emotional mind. And as we will see, this is important in healing from emotional dysregulation. Anatomically, wise mind is associated with the prefrontal cortex. Wise mind, for some people, has spiritual connotations. The concept of wise mind overlaps with other terms such as the witness, the observer, the real self, the ground of all being, spirit, universal consciousness, Atman, the God within us all, the ideal parent, the quantum field, and God. To understand the spiritual associations of wise mind, it is helpful to consider the Hindu concepts of the wheel of awareness and of the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. In session 4, we discussed metaphysical idealism. Hinduism's causal body, the fundamental essence of the universe, can be thought of as consciousness without a self to experience it. From that causal body arises a subtle body, which has also been called spirit or imagination, and the gross body, or the material, which includes our bodies. The gross body is all that is material. In an inversion of the idealist perspective, philosophical materialism, the dominant modern metaphysics, sees matter, or the gross body, as what is essential in the universe. A metaphor may help us understand the concept of the wheel of awareness. Consider a bicycle wheel with a hub, spokes, and a rim. Imagine that the hub is pure consciousness without experience, or the causal body. A spoke directs the pure consciousness at any particular moment in time at the rim. Where the attention of the spoke lands is all that exists in the material world, or the gross body. Between the hub and the rim is the subtle body, spirit or the imagination. All the pain, stress, trauma, and the drama of life occurs at the rim. The hub is unaffected by it. Another helpful metaphor for wise mind is that of the sky and the weather. Wise mind is the sky. Human experience is the weather. The weather can change from sunny to stormy, but that weather does not affect the sky. In everyday life or attention, or where pure consciousness is directed, wanders randomly from one place to another on the rim of the wheel. Personality can be seen as the rim's favorite spots to wander to. Mindfulness can help us direct the spoke where we choose it to go. Realizing we have this choice and practicing making it until it becomes a habit is one of the goals of the simple course. To repeat, Wise mind is pure consciousness or the causal body that is at the center of the wheel of awareness. It is the observer. From it arises the spoke of attention that focuses pure awareness on one, the internal, such as inner sensations, feelings, thoughts, and the imagination, and two, the external, such as sensory perceptions. Meditation and mindfulness are practices by which we learn to influence the otherwise random meanderings of the spoke of attention. So, what is wise mind remediation? Throughout this course, we've used the metaphor of holes in the sidewalk to illustrate how we can fall into patterns of repeated dysregulated feelings, thoughts, or behaviors, and experience distress and unhappiness. The simple course helps us get out of those holes faster and eventually avoid them altogether. The tools, skills, and strategies we've discussed are the methods we use for getting to know our holes, getting out of them faster, and avoiding them. We have already introduced one way of getting out of the holes using our rational minds when we discussed rational mind remediation. Today, we're going to talk about how to get out of the holes using our wise minds. Ultimately, we'd like to live a life that is led by wise mind, not by dysregulated feelings, thoughts, or behaviors. To fully grasp the concept of wise mind remediation, we will need to understand internal family systems, which we introduce in the next session. For logistical reasons, we are presenting wise mind remediation before internal family systems. I suggest that after you have done session 24, which presents internal family systems, you come back and review this session. It'll make more sense. There are 5 steps in the wise mind remediation algorithm. Let's name them and go through each one at a time. The 5 steps of the wise mind remediation algorithm are 1. Become acquainted with your internal family part selves, which we'll discuss next week. 2. Use the part selves that you have identified in your internal family as advanced targets in your holes diary cards. 3. Do a wise mind chain analysis following the template provided. 4. Strengthen your access to wise mind. 5. Allow your wise mind to become acquainted with the members of your internal family. Allow wise mind to see, understand, and soothe, or be a sort of ideal parent to your internal family parts. Wise mind remediation is a stage 2 trauma therapy tool that helps process the associated traumatic complexes. To use Wise Mind, it's essential to have practiced and be able to use stage 1 skills, tools, and strategies so as to be able to stay within reach of or return to the window of tolerable emotions. Step 1 of the Wise Mind algorithm involves becoming acquainted with our internal family part selves, which we will discuss next week. To become acquainted with your internal family system parts, A. Name all the internal family system part selves that you have discovered in yourself. For example, hurt child, angry older child, child in despair, inner or outer critic, people pleaser, fierce defender, perfectionist, procrastinator, indulger, depressive, etc. Don't forget the mature adult part, which may be more or less of a facade. After naming the part selves, acquaint yourself with them by B. Visualizing in your mind's eye each of these parts. C. Being curious about each part's personality and how each part typically behaves, thinks, and feels, and what is their typical state of activation. Don't forget to write all this down. D. Consider the origin story of each part. When and why did it arise in your life to protect you? How did it protect you? Completing step 1 is necessary before proceeding to step 2, in which you use these parts as advanced targets in your holes diary card. To help you with step 1 of Wise Mind remediation, use this becoming acquainted with part selves template. Internal family systems therapists have created a deck of 75 cards that depict the most common part selves. Just like you use the feeling wheel to try to identify your feelings, if you have difficulty identifying your internal family parts, this card deck may be helpful. Before getting to know the dominant feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of your part selves, it's useful to have a picture in your mind's eye of what those parts might look like. This image may be of you at some point in the past. Going through old photo albums may inspire you to find a part self that exists within you. Step two of wise mind remediation asks that you use the part selves you have identified in yourself as advanced targets in the Hole's diary cards. As you know, Hole's diary cards are the second simple tool. When we introduced them, we said there were beginning, intermediate, and advanced targets. So far, we've been using beginner and intermediate targets in our Hole's diary card. After we introduce wise mind remediation and internal family systems, we'll be able to use advanced targets, which are internal family part selves, as the targets in our Hole's diary card. The anxious child, internal critic, and compulsive caretaker in this Hole's diary card are examples of advanced targets. Step three of wise mind remediation asks you to do a wise mind chain analysis following a template. In a regular chain analysis, we ask ourselves if there was an event that triggered us and consider what we felt, our bodily sensations, the thoughts we had, our behaviors or behavioral urges, and our energy balance before we became activated. In a wise mind chain analysis, we consider which internal family parts became activated in us when we were activated. When we become familiar with these parts, we will know what they look like and what they typically feel, think, and do. Because more than one part can become activated at one time, we will also consider how the different part that became activated interacted with each other during the period of activation. Often, these interactions are conflictual. To do the wise mind chain analysis, we use this template. Step four of wise mind remediation asks us to foster our wise mind through visualization by following a template. Essentially, everyone has access to wise mind, but in some people, its presence is drowned out by the loud voices of the part selves. To better hear and have access to wise mind, one, think of someone or something that captures for you the spirit of understanding, empathy, equanimity, and generosity. I think of that someone or something as the wise mind catcher after the Native North American dream catcher. That someone or something can be a fictional or historical character, a natural phenomenon or an animal. It can be a spirit, such as a guardian angel, someone you know personally or have never met, someone invented or real. Two, picture that someone or something as vividly as possible in your mind. To help you visualize this, you can draw, paint, or find a drawing or picture of it. Keep it somewhere you can readily access. Three, regularly practice visualizing wise mind and pair that image with positive feelings and intentions. You can do this as a meditation practice. Schedule some time every week to do this. You can think of this as installing a wise mind app or resource in yourself. Fostering wise mind can be a lengthy process, but can also be enormously helpful and healing. Wise mind has a number of characteristics which can be remembered as the 8 C's: confidence and firm limits around violations, creativity and imaginative social problem solving, compassion and love for the self and others, curiosity and openness to our own and other people's truth, connection and universal inclusivity, clarity, courage, personal empowerment and dignity, and calmness that is grounded and non reactive. Step five of wise mind remediation asks us to allow our wise mind to befriend the various parts of our internal family by seeing, understanding, and soothing them. Wise mind becomes an ideal parent to our internal family parts. Remember that rational and emotional minds speak different languages and therefore have trouble communicating. It's as difficult to have a conversation or persuade an emotional mind of a rational idea as it is to have a conversation with a cat or a dog. There is, however, one language both rational mind and emotional mind understand, and that is the imagery that takes place in the mind's eye. Wise mind takes advantage of this and uses imagery to facilitate its communication with the rational and emotional minds. Allowing internal parts and wise mind to become acquainted with each other involves visualizing encounters between them. In these encounters, wise mind is aware that emotional parts are sensitive and is prepared to meet with emotional responses from them. In this way, wise mind is like the ideal parent. Children may be often emotionally dysregulated, but the ideal parent recognizes that it is a feature of the developmental stage, stays well regulated, is attuned and responsive to that child. This is soothing for the child. To allow wise mind to parent our internal family parts, we can follow an algorithm. After one, becoming better acquainted with your part selves. Two, starting to use advanced targets in your diary card. Three, doing advanced chain analysis. And four, fostering your wise mind. Do step five, wise mind parenting of internal family parts. A, bring up in your imagination the video of the event for which you did the wise mind chain analysis. B, allow wise mind to see, understand, and feel empathy for each of your internal family parts that became activated during the event. Observe each part's feelings, thoughts, behaviors, typical states of activation, and origin story. C, imagine progressively more intimate encounters with or without dialogue between your wise mind figure and individual parts of your internal family. Allow them to have a conversation about the event that led to the situation in which you were activated. Wise mind maintains a non judgmental, understanding stance, and that helps the parts to return to and stay in the window of tolerance. D, the goal of this practice is for the internal family members to relate securely to or learn to trust wise mind, so that they allow wise mind to lead the self system in situations that would previously have triggered parts and resulted in them taking over the self system. E, imagine how the situation would have unfolded if wise mind had been allowed to lead the self. F, use the editing, splicing, and pasting strategy and visualize this edited, wise mind led situation repeatedly in your imagination. Are there challenges when we are working with emotional parts arising from trauma that we should be aware of? One of the challenges that arises in the patient therapist relationship when working with people with trauma and attachment issues is referred to as transference and countertransference. In casual relationships, it is easier to remain in mature adult part self mode and rational mind. In more intimate relationships, internal family systems part selves are more often activated. Intimate relationships include those with partners, family members, close friends, but also with therapists. In therapy, one or more of the person's part selves may be preferentially activated, and they may have strong dysregulated feelings of shame, distrust, fear of abandonment, anger, dependence, need for rescue, etc., with or towards the therapist. This is called transference. If recognized and examined, transference presents a critical opportunity to work on dysregulated emotions. Sometimes transference is not recognized by the therapist, in which case it may interfere with the therapeutic progress. Other times, the client may not accept that some of their feelings towards a therapist may be related to their past and that they are transference. They may believe such feelings are well regulated and justified. Sometimes they are, but often they are reenactments of previous important relationships the client had. Either way, they need to be worked through or the therapy will stall. Sometimes the client and their part selves can bring out the therapist's part selves. Anger brings out fawning. Anger can bring out anger. Anger can bring out fear. When these emotions occur in the therapist, it's called countertransference. Although all mental health professionals commit therapeutic blunders and are less than perfectly empathic, they sometimes encounter clients' responses toward them that are mostly dysregulated. This occurs with some frequency in therapy, and if it is not identified and worked through, it can lead to therapy becoming unproductive and at times re traumatizing for both clients and therapists. One difficult type of transference as dysregulated reactions towards the therapist are called, occurs when the client's outer critic is activated by the therapist. The client's outer critic may continuously find what the therapist does to be wrong, hurtful, or unhelpful. In these cases, it is easy for therapists to fall into the dynamics of becoming fearful and defending themselves and or find the client ungrateful and counterattacking or becoming passive aggressive. These dysregulated feelings that the therapist has about the client are called countertransference. When problematic countertransference occurs, it should be identified and worked with. It is often a reenactment of past relationships. Understanding and working through transference and countertransference issues can be very challenging, but can also be an opportunity for growth and healing. Progress in therapy depends on the therapeutic alliance, which is an understanding between the therapists and the clients as to the work that needs to be done. The therapeutic alliance is the contract between the therapist and the client's rational and wise minds. The client or therapist's emotional mind may sabotage the therapeutic alliance. When a client in therapy is predominantly an emotional mind and has little access to rational or wise mind, a therapeutic alliance may be difficult to establish. The person who is an outer critic emotional mind, for example, cannot see that they are the ones who have a psychological issue. The outer critic is convinced that it is the world and the therapist who is the problem. Unless this is worked through and the client can access some rational mind, the therapy is doomed. Sometimes, of course, a client's criticism of the therapist is well justified and regulated. In the PowerPoint presentation that you will find on the website, there's a review and practice component that covers the tools, techniques, and strategies that we have previously covered in this simple course. Looking over those slides will help you consolidate the material. Let's look at the homework for this session. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and see you next session.